Hello everyone, this is Hina Mittal, Assistant Professor, School of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Sri Guru Ram Rai University, Dehradun. In this presentation, I am discussing about nanoparticles. So come on the first slide, that is about definition of nanoparticles. So nanoparticles are basically the microscopic structure which is having a nano size of 1 to 100 nanometer. These are very tiny particles that cannot be seen through our naked eyes. They have industrial as well as biological properties that have made a wide range of application in our pharmaceutical industry. Coming on the next slide, that is the properties of the nanoparticles. So, talking about the first property, which is it has high surface area. Because of their tiny particles, the nanoparticles have the large surface area through which it can expand its volume, which led to more chemically reactive of that molecule. The most important advantages of having the high surface area is that it improves the reactivity, which help to create better catalyst, which help in speed up the chemical reaction. Next, properties of nanoparticle is the quantum effect. So, quantum effects are the effects which are absorbed within the things that are very small or that is having a nano-sized particles. It includes optical, electrical as well as magnetic effect. Next, we talk about the tunable characteristic, that is the shape, size as well as composition or formulation of the nanoparticles that will provide a desired characteristic in the formulation which we made for the nanoparticles. Next, we will talk about nanoformulation, why it is important for us, because there are various type of formulation in the market. So why nanoformulation matters for us? The first thing that we talk about, that it enhances the bioavailability. Enhancing bioavailability means it improves the absorption of the poorly soluble drug, which will also lead to enhancing the bioavailability. Bioavailability basically means the rate and amount of drug that which reaching our systemic circulation, that is the blood. So it will effective in improving the quality as well as efficacy of the poorly soluble drug. Next is the targeted delivery. So targeted delivery is basically means targeted at specific site, tissue or organ to a particular disease, which could lead to effective as well as precise treatment on a particular disease. Next, it will also improve the stability as well as shelf life of various drugs that have low shelf life, which will ensure their potency as well as efficacy of most of the drug. Next, we will talk about the components of the nanoparticle formulation. So there are three components of nanoparticles. First is the core, second is the shell, and third is the surface modification. So first we talk about the core. Core is basically the central component of the nanoparticles that will include the lipid, polymers as well as the metals. It is basically the central layer in which the nanoparticles are embedded or enclosed. Second, we will talk about the shell. Shell is basically the outer layer in which the nanoparticles or the core is encapsulated, which provide protection as well as stabilization to the core material or the nanoparticles. The next component is the surface modification. So surface modification is basically the addition of ligands molecules, targeting moieties or some other molecules that will enhance the stability as well as property of the nanoparticles. So next is basically the representation of the nanoparticles. So in first we can talk about the formation of nanoparticles, that is the polymer chain, the drug in which the water is added, through which we can make a polymer core in which the drug is encapsulated, that make the nanoparticles in which we can embed the lipid polyethylene glycol and make a lipid nanoparticles. So this is the representation of how we will make the nanoparticles. In the next slide, we're discussing about the synthesis of nanoparticles. So first step is that the larger molecules of the nanoparticles will break down into smaller molecules through a technique which is known as lithography or etching. Lithography is basically composed of polymers which are delivered to flat substrate from the solution. It is a printing process in which a metal plate is prepared, in which we can directly transferring the molecules to the substrate with a sub-micrometer resolution. Next is the bottom-up process, in which we can build up the nanoparticles by using a chemical synthesis or a chemical reaction. Next is the hybrid approach, in which we can combine the two processes, that is the top-down process and the bottom-up process, to make a complex nanostructure or a nanoparticle formulation. So in next slide, we talk about the application of nanoparticles. So first, application of nanoparticle, that is help in cancer therapy. That is, it deliver the chemotherapeutic agent, as well as it target the tumor cell, as well as help in the monitoring of the treatment response. Next application of nanoparticle formulation is the bioimaging. Bioimaging is an imaging technique which will observe the cellular structure and the entire cell or the tissue, such as MRI, that is magnetic resonance imaging, as well as optical imaging. Next application is tissue engineering. So tissue engineering, in which the nanoparticles are incorporated into scaffolds. Scaffolds are basically the implants or injectables which are used to deliver the drug into the cell, tissue or organ or the genes into the body, and it will also help in regenerative medicine as well as tissue repair. The next application is drug delivery. So nanoparticles will act as a carrier for various drugs, in which the drug is formulated as a nanoparticle and it is used in various drug delivery systems like vaccines, etc., which will help in improving the efficacy as well as safety of a particular drug. Next is the advantages of nanoparticle formulation. So the first advantage is it improve the bioavailability. So by enhancing the solubility, stability, as well as absorption of the drug, it will help in improving the bioavailability of that formulation, which will lead to better therapeutic outcome of that formulation. Next advantage is the targeted delivery. So targeted delivery is basically targeted at a specific cell, tissue or the organ, in which we use to target at a particular disease, which will improve the efficacy of that particular formulation. Next is that it enhances the permeability. So nanoparticles are small in size, which will help or allow us to penetrate the biological barrier, which will help us to reach the formulation into a barrier that will hardly to cross for most of the formulations, especially the poorly water soluble drug. Next advantage is the controlled release. So the nano formulations will provide the sustained as well as controlled release. Sustained release, which maintain the drug release at a sustained period of time but not at constant rate. But controlled release will maintain the drug release over sustained period of time at a constant rate, which will help in improving the therapeutic efficacy. Next is the challenges which was in nanoparticle formulation. So the first challenge is the stability. So stability is for ensuring the long-term stability as well as shelf life of the nanoparticles, which was the most challenging step in the formulation of nanoparticles. Next is the scalability. Scalability means the developing the nanoparticles which is cost effective to the patient, as well as the manufacturing process in a large scale. That was also the ongoing challenge for formulation of a nanoparticles. And the last challenge is the regulatory compliance, that is the safety as well as efficacy of the nanoparticles, which is the main problem in the formulation of the nanoparticles. Last but not the least, that is the future direction in nanoparticle formulation. So nanoparticles are used in various multifunctional formulation, that is, it has multiple functionality, like it helps in a targeted delivery as well as in bio imaging, as well as it was also used in personalized treatment. Personalized treatment is also known as precision medicine, which will integrate the information about a person gene, protein, diagnose as well as treat the disease at the early stage. In simple, we can say that right drug at the right dose at the right time. Next is the smart nanoparticles, means it responds to a specific nuclei such as the pH, temperature, or the enzymatic activity that will trigger the release of that reagent of the material at a particular site. Next is the sustainable manufacturing, that is eco-friendly formulation. So nanoparticles are basically the eco-friendly formulation and are used for large-scale production that will reduce the environmental impact as well as production cost of that nanoparticles. Thank you for your valuable time. Thank you so much.